The fence post had come loose again. Roy Hutchins spat into the red dust and dismounted from his horse, pulling tools from his saddlebag. 3 years on this frontier world, and he still wasn't used to how the wind ate through everything. Metal corroded faster here, wood dried and cracked within months. Even the modified cattle he raised seemed to age quicker under the harsh double suns. He hammered the post back into place, sweat running down his weathered face despite the cooling evening air. His ranch stretched for miles in every direction, empty except for the distant shapes of his herd. That's how he liked it. Empty. Quiet. No one asking questions about Earth or why he'd left or what he was running from. Roy was packing his tools when he heard it. Not with his ears exactly. More like a feeling that crawled up his spine and settled behind his eyes. A desperate, wordless cry that translated in his mind as a single concept. Mama. He froze, one hand on his horse's saddle. The animal's ears flicked nervously. Roy scanned the darkening horizon, seeing nothing but scrub brush and rocky outcrops. The cry came again, weaker this time. Mama, please, hurt hell, Roy muttered. He swung back onto his horse and urged it forward, following the strange pull in his mind. Whatever was calling had to be close. The psychic impression grew stronger as he rode, leading him away from his property line toward a series of shallow canyons he rarely visited. The horse balked at the edge of a fresh crater, nearly throwing Roy from the saddle. He calmed the animal and dismounted, approaching on foot. The crater was maybe 20 feet across, the earth still warm from impact. At the center lay a crumpled shape that made Roy's blood run cold. He'd seen pictures. Every human in the colonies had seen pictures. The scales were unmistakable, even on something this small. Dracovian, a baby one sure, but still a member of the most feared predator species in known space. The creature was no bigger than a large dog, its rust-colored scales dull and cracked from dehydration. One wing bent at an unnatural angle. As Roy approached, it raised its head weakly and fixed him with eyes that held far too much intelligence for something newborn. Mama, the thought whispered into his mind. Help, Mama? I ain't your mama, Roy said automatically, but his hands were already reaching for his canteen. The baby dragon tried to crawl toward him and collapsed. Roy could see deep scrapes along its belly where it had been dragged across rough ground. Burns on its feet from atmospheric entry. Someone had dropped this creature from orbit and left it to die. He should walk away. That was the smart choice. The legal choice. Dracovians had destroyed colonies, killed thousands. The Galactic Council had standing orders to eliminate them on sight. Any age, any circumstance. Helping one was probably treason. The baby dragon whimpered, a pitiful sound that didn't match the terrifying reputation of its species. It looked at Roy with those two smart eyes and projected simple images into his mind. Cold. Alone. Scared. Want Mama. Roy cursed under his breath and knelt beside the creature. He poured water carefully into its mouth, watching it swallow desperately. Up close, he could see how young it really was. Its scales still had the soft texture of infancy. Its claws were barely formed. Whatever this thing might become right now, it was just a baby that had been thrown away like trash. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done, Roy told it, stripping off his jacket. The dragon's body temperature was dropping fast as the desert night closed in. He wrapped the jacket around the small form, careful of the broken wing. The creature made a sound like a purr and pressed against his chest. Roy's horse wanted nothing to do with the dragon, so he walked back to his ranch, leading the animal with one hand and cradling the baby Dracovian in his other arm. Every step, he argued with himself. He could still dump it somewhere. Could call the authorities. Could do the sensible thing, but the creature had stopped crying. It rested against him with complete trust, its breathing evening out. When Roy looked down, he found it watching him with an expression that looked almost like hope. Mama found me, it seemed to say. Safe now. By the time Roy reached his small ranch house, he'd already made his decision. He carried the dragon inside and laid it gently on a pile of blankets near the heating unit. Its wing needed setting. He had medical supplies for his cattle that might work. The creature watched him gather materials, projecting calm curiosity rather than fear. You understand me, don't you? Roy asked as he prepared a splint. Not just words. You know what I'm thinking. The dragon tilted its head. An image flashed in Roy's mind. His own face overlaid with feelings of safety and warmth. It trusted him completely, saw him as protection. As family, Roy carefully straightened the broken wing and the dragon didn't fight him. It whimpered but stayed still, somehow knowing he was trying to help. He splinted the wing and wrapped it, then offered more water and some raw meat from his cold storage. The dragon ate with desperate hunger. As the night deepened, Roy sat on his floor watching the small creature finally sleep peacefully. He'd lost his wife and daughter 5 years ago to a transport accident, came to this empty world to forget, to be alone, to never feel responsible for another life again. Now he had a baby dragon curled up on his blankets, depending on him completely, a creature the entire galaxy wanted dead, a creature that could someday grow large enough to destroy his ranch with one swipe of its claws. But when it slept, it made soft chirping sounds. When it dreamed, Roy could feel gentle emotions drifting through the air. Contentment, gratitude, love. "Gonna call you Rusty," Roy said quietly, "on account of your color." The dragon's tail twitched in sleep and Roy felt a warm pulse of approval in his mind. It liked the name. Liked him. Had already decided he was family. Roy pulled a blanket over his own shoulders and leaned back against the wall. Tomorrow he'd figure out what to do. Tonight he'd just make sure the little thing survived until morning. That's all. Nothing more complicated than that. But as Rusty curled tighter into his nest of blankets, Roy felt something he hadn't felt in 5 long years. A reason to care what happened next. Rusty knocked over the water trough for the 3rd time that week. Roy watched from his porch as 200 gallons of precious water turned the dusty ground to mud, while the young dragon looked back at him with what could only be described as embarrassment. 2 weeks of recovery had turned the dying creature into something surprisingly energetic and clumsy. "You're supposed to drink from it, not wrestle it," Roy called out. He set down his coffee and walked over to right the trough again. Rusty had grown noticeably in just 14 days. Now the size of a small horse, the dragon moved with the awkward coordination of a puppy, still figuring out its own legs. Or in this case, legs and wings and a tail that seemed to have a mind of its own. The broken wing was healing, but Roy could tell it would never be quite right. The bone had set crooked despite his best efforts. Rusty would probably never fly like other Dracovians. Maybe that's why its own kind had abandoned it. Defective, unwanted, left to die because it couldn't meet their standards. Roy ran his hand along the dragon's neck, feeling the warm scales beneath his palm. Rusty leaned into the touch, purring like a massive cat. In his mind, Roy felt waves of affection and an emotion that translated roughly to sorry about the water. "It's fine," Roy said. "We'll work on your coordination." The past 2 weeks had been a revelation. Rusty learned faster than any animal Roy had ever known. The dragon understood human speech now, even if it couldn't speak itself. It had figured out how to open doors with its claws. It knew which cattle were pregnant just by looking at them. And most impressively, it had started helping with ranch work. Roy watched as Rusty moved toward the cattle herd, which had been grazing too far toward the dangerous ravine lands. The dragon lowered its body and moved in smooth, controlled motions that came naturally. The cattle, which should have panicked at the sight of a predator, simply moved where Rusty guided them. The dragon projected feelings of calm and safety that even the animals could sense. "Good work," Roy said when Rusty returned. The dragon's chest puffed with pride, but their peaceful routine shattered that afternoon when Roy spotted dust on the horizon. A vehicle approaching. He felt his stomach drop. Visitors were rare out here and rarely good news. Roy quickly guided Rusty into the barn. "Stay here. Stay quiet. Don't come out no matter what you hear." The dragon sensed his fear and pressed close, not wanting to separate. "I mean it, Rusty. People can't know about you yet." The vehicle pulled up as Roy closed the barn door. Beth Sullivan climbed out, a neighboring rancher from 15 miles south. She was a tough woman in her 50s, the kind who'd carved out her own place on this harsh world through sheer determination. "Roy," she greeted him, her sharp eyes scanning the property. "Noticed you missed the supply run last week. Thought I'd check you hadn't been eaten by canyon cats." "Appreciate it, but I'm fine," Roy said, positioning himself between Beth and the barn. "Just been busy with ranch work." Beth's eyes narrowed. "You got more fencing up. New water system, too. That's a lot of work for one man." She took a step toward the barn. "You hire help?" "No help. Just me." A loud crash came from inside the barn. Beth's hand dropped to her sidearm. "What was that?" "Cattle got loose," Roy said quickly. "They're jumpy today." Another crash. Then a distinctly non-cattle sound. Something between a chirp and a growl. Beth drew her weapon and pushed past Roy before he could stop her. She kicked open the barn door, weapon raised. Rusty stood in the center of the barn, having knocked over a stack of feed bags. The dragon froze when it saw Beth, its eyes going wide. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Beth whispered, "Holy hell, that's a Dracovian." Roy stepped between them. "Beth, wait! Get away from it, Roy." Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Those things destroyed the Harrison colony. Killed 3,000 people. This one's a baby. It's not dangerous yet. They grow fast, Roy. In a few months, that thing will be able to tear apart buildings." Beth kept her weapon trained on Rusty. "I'm calling this in. I have to." Rusty made a soft sound, and Roy felt its terror washing through his mind. The dragon didn't understand the words, but it understood danger. It understood that the woman wanted to hurt it. Despite its size, despite its predator nature, Rusty moved behind Roy like a child hiding behind a parent. "Look at it," Roy said quietly. "Really look, Beth. Does that seem like a monster to you?" Beth's aim wavered. Rusty peeked out from behind Roy, its expression fearful but not aggressive. The dragon's emotions were so strong that even Beth could sense them. Fear, confusion, a desperate desire not to be hurt again. Its own kind dumped it to die. Roy continued. "Threw it from orbit because its wing won't heal right. I couldn't just leave it. The law says any Dracovian gets reported. Any age, any circumstances, but Beth's weapon lowered slightly. Roy, they'll kill it. They'll probably arrest you too. I know. Then why?" Beth holstered her weapon but kept her hand near it. Why risk everything for something that could turn on you? Roy didn't have a good answer. He just knew that when he looked at Rusty, he didn't see a monster. He saw a scared kid that had been abandoned. He saw something that trusted him completely and depended on him for survival. He saw the first thing in 5 years that had made him feel like his life mattered. "Come here, Rusty," Roy said gently. The dragon hesitated, then slowly approached, keeping Roy between itself and Beth. "Show her you're gentle." Rusty moved with careful, controlled steps. It lowered its head submissively and sat, making itself as small and non-threatening as possible. The dragon looked at Beth with intelligent eyes that held no malice, only hope that she might understand. Beth stared for a long moment. "This is insane." "I know. The marshal's coming next month. Standard inspection. He'll find it." "I know that too," Beth cursed under her breath. She looked at Roy, then at Rusty, then back at Roy. Finally, she sighed. "You got 1 month to figure something out. I won't report this now, but if that thing shows any sign of aggression, any sign at all, I'm calling it in immediately." Relief flooded through Roy. "Thank you, Beth." "Don't thank me. I'm probably making the biggest mistake of my life." She walked back to her vehicle, then paused. "Roy, those things killed my cousin on Harrison Colony. I watched the vids. So understand this, I'm trusting you because I can see you care about it. But if you're wrong, if it turns, a lot of people will die. That weight's on you now." Roy watched her drive away, dust trailing behind her vehicle. He felt Rusty press against his leg, seeking comfort. The dragon knew something serious had happened, even if it didn't understand all the details. 1 month, Roy said quietly, running his hand over Rusty's scales. "We got 1 month to prove you're different." Rusty looked up at him with complete trust, and Roy felt the weight of Beth's words settle on his shoulders. He'd taken responsibility for a life again, for a creature that could become everything the galaxy feared. But when Rusty nuzzled against him, projecting feelings of love and family, Roy knew he'd make the same choice again. He just hoped it wouldn't get them both killed. Rain hammered against the roof of Roy's ranch house, a rare storm that would give his land a week of relief from the endless dust. Roy sat at his table, staring at a map of the canyon lands while Rusty dozed near the heating unit. The dragon was now bigger than any horse Roy had ever owned, its scales gleaming in the dim light. 6 months had passed since that first night, and the deadline Beth had warned about was here. Tomorrow, Colonial Marshal Diane Foster would arrive for her annual inspection of all frontier properties. She was thorough, professional, and had a reputation for following regulations to the letter. There was no way she'd miss a fully grown Dracovian living in Roy's barn. Roy had spent the last month preparing a shelter in the deep canyons 5 miles from his property. A cave system that would hide Rusty from aerial scans. He'd stocked it with water and food, built a comfortable space where the dragon could wait out the inspection. But the plan required Rusty to stay there alone, possibly for days. and Roy could feel the dragon's anxiety about separation. "We've practiced this," Roy said, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring Rusty or himself. "You go to the canyon. You stay quiet. You wait for my signal. Then you come home." Rusty lifted its massive head, eyes reflecting the lamplight. Scared, the thought drifted into Roy's mind. "What if you don't come back?" "I'll come back. I promise." The dragon rose and moved closer, lowering its head to Roy's level. Over the months, they'd developed a deeper connection. Rusty could project more complex thoughts now, and Roy had learned to send simple feelings back. It wasn't quite telepathy, more like emotional sharing, but it meant they could truly understand each other. "Stay together," Rusty projected, along with images of the two of them working the ranch. "Safe together, family together. I know, buddy. But if the marshal finds you, they'll take you away. They'll kill you." Roy pressed his forehead against Rusty's scaled snout. "I can't let that happen." They left before dawn, Roy riding his horse while Rusty walked alongside. The dragon moved with surprising grace for its size, having long ago mastered the coordination that eluded it as a baby. The canyon shelter was ready, stocked with everything Rusty would need. Roy helped the dragon settle in, making sure the cave entrance was well hidden. 3 days at most, Roy said. "Then I'll come get you." Rusty made a low sound of distress but nodded, understanding. The dragon curled up in the cave, looking smaller than it was. Roy felt his heart break a little as he turned to leave. This creature trusted him completely, depended on him, loved him with the unconditional devotion of family, and he was leaving it alone in a cave to hide like a criminal, because that's what they were, criminals, breaking laws meant to protect the colonies from a species that had proven itself capable of terrible violence. Roy rode back to his ranch as the first sun rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. He'd barely finished his morning work when he spotted the marshal's vehicle approaching, flanked by 2 deputies. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to appear calm. Just another inspection. Nothing unusual. Marshal Diane Foster was a woman in her 40s with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She greeted Roy professionally and began her inspection, checking his permits, scanning his property lines, reviewing his cattle health records. Everything was in order. Roy began to think they might actually pull this off. Then the storm changed everything. Dark clouds rolled in faster than any weather system Roy had seen. Lightning split the sky, and within minutes the world was engulfed in a violent electrical storm. The marshal's scanner went haywire, picking up massive energy surges from the canyon lands. One of the deputies pointed to smoke rising in the distance. "Fire," Marshal Foster said grimly. "Lightning strike. It's spreading fast toward those canyons." Roy's blood turned to ice. Rusty was in those canyons. The fire would trap the dragon, and Rusty wouldn't know to run. Would wait for Roy's signal like a good, obedient child while the flames closed in. "I need to check on something," Roy said, already moving toward his horse. "Mr. Hutchins, that fire's dangerous. We should wait for containment crews." Roy didn't wait. He spurred his horse into a gallop, racing toward the growing wall of smoke. Behind him, he heard the marshal shouting orders to her deputies. Their vehicle followed, sirens blaring. The fire was worse than he'd feared. Flames consumed the dry brush, creating an inferno that roared like a living thing. Roy's horse refused to go further, panicking at the heat and smoke. He dismounted and ran on foot, pulling his shirt over his mouth and nose. "Rusty," he shouted into the flames. Through their connection, he felt the dragon's terror. Trapped, scared, calling for him. "I'm coming." "Stay where you are!" He found the cave entrance blocked by burning debris. Through the smoke, he could see Rusty's massive form trying to push through. But the fire drove the dragon back. Without thinking, Roy grabbed a fallen branch and began clearing the burning wood, ignoring the pain as embers burned his hands and arms. "Come on," he yelled. "Rusty, push!" The dragon burst through the remaining debris, scales blackened with smoke. Rusty grabbed Roy's shirt in its teeth and pulled him away from the flames just as the cave entrance collapsed behind them. They stumbled into a cleared area, both coughing and singed. Roy looked up to find Marshal Foster and her 2 deputies standing 30 feet away, weapons drawn. They'd followed him. They'd seen everything. Behind them, their vehicle's headlights cut through the smoke, illuminating Roy and the massive Dracovian that stood protectively over him. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and heavy breathing. Marshal Foster's voice was steady despite the shock on her face. Roy Hutchins, that's a Dracovian. You're harboring an illegal alien of a hostile species. Roy got to his feet slowly, positioning himself between Rusty and the weapons. The dragon lowered its head, making soft, distressed sounds. It understood danger even if it didn't understand the words. Her name's Rusty, Roy said, and she's not hostile. She's family. One of the deputies laughed nervously. Family? Sir, that thing's species has killed thousands. This thing just saved my life, and 6 months ago I saved hers. Roy kept his voice calm. She was dumped to die because her wing doesn't work right. I couldn't leave her, and I won't let you kill her now. Marshal Foster studied them both, her weapon still raised. Galactic law is clear. Any Dracovian found in human space is to be terminated immediately. Then you'll have to shoot me first. The words hung in the smoky air. Rusty pressed closer to Roy, projecting waves of fear and love that were so strong even the deputies seemed to feel them. The dragon could attack, could probably kill all three of them before they got off more than a few shots, but Rusty didn't move. Just stayed close to Roy, trusting him to protect them both. Marshal Foster's weapon lowered slightly. She looked at Roy, then at Rusty, then back at Roy. She really saved you? Pulled me out of the fire herself. Could have run, could have saved herself and left me to burn, but she came for me. Roy's voice cracked. She's not a monster, Marshal. She's just scared. The deputies looked to their commander, waiting for orders. The fire raged around them, forcing a decision. Marshal Foster holstered her weapon, though her hand stayed near it. I'm giving you 48 hours, Mr. Hutchins. 48 hours to convince me that Dragon won't become a threat. If you can't, I report this and she dies. Understand? Roy nodded, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If I'm wrong about this, if she hurts anyone, it's on my conscience. The Marshal looked at Rusty, who met her gaze with intelligent, fearful eyes. You've got 2 days to prove she's different. Use them wisely. As they escorted Roy and Rusty away from the fire, Roy felt the dragon's confusion and relief. They were alive, together. But the real test was just beginning. Roy had 48 hours to prove that compassion wasn't weakness. That family wasn't defined by species. That the scared creature his galaxy called a monster deserved the same chance at life that anyone else got. He just hoped it would be enough time. Beth Sullivan's video went viral before Roy even knew she'd filmed it. She'd been documenting Rusty for weeks without telling him, capturing footage of the dragon gently herding cattle, carefully helping Roy repair fences, and playing with the ranch dogs like an oversized puppy. By the time Roy woke up on the first morning of his 48-hour deadline, the footage had been shared across every human colony in the sector. Marshal Foster arrived at dawn with her tablet showing the view counts. 2 million people have watched your dragon in the last 6 hours. The colonial government is getting flooded with messages. Some want her protected. More want her dead. Roy stood on his porch while Rusty dozed in the yard, oblivious to the attention. I didn't ask Beth to do that. Maybe not. But now everyone knows. The Galactic Council sent an official protest an hour ago. They're demanding we follow protocol and terminate her. The Marshal sat on the porch steps looking tired. The Earth government is convening a special tribunal. You and Rusty have to appear. They're gonna kill her. Maybe. Or maybe Beth's video bought you something more valuable than time. She bought you witnesses. Marshal Foster pulled up another file on her tablet. Look at these comments. Thousands of people saying they never saw a Dracovian act like that. Parents showing the videos to their kids, teaching them about compassion. Scientists wanting to study her development. You've started something, Roy. Now you have to finish it. The tribunal was held in the colonial capital's largest hall, broadcast live across human space. Roy walked in wearing his only clean shirt, feeling completely out of place among the lawyers and government officials. Rusty walked beside him, moving slowly and carefully, trying not to accidentally knock anything over with her bulk. The dragon's nervousness flooded through their connection. Too many people, too many eyes. Too loud, it's okay, Roy whispered. Just stay close. The prosecution presented first. A stern woman in an expensive suit showed footage of Dracovian attacks on human colonies, ships burning, buildings collapsed, bodies recovered from the ruins. Roy felt Rusty flinch beside him as the images played. The dragon could sense the pain and death in those recordings, even if she didn't understand context. This is what Dracovians do, the prosecutor said. They destroy, they kill. and this tribunal is being asked to let one live among us because it currently acts docile. She turned to face Roy. Mr. Hutchins raised this creature from infancy. It sees him as family. But what happens in 5 years when it reaches full maturity? When its instincts take over? When it decides humans are prey instead of parents? The prosecutor pulled up genetic studies. Dracovians are biologically programmed for violence. Their brain structure rewards aggressive behavior. No amount of nurturing can override millions of years of evolution. Mr. Hutchins hasn't domesticated a monster. He's simply delayed the inevitable. Roy felt the room's mood shift. The prosecutor was winning. Even people who'd been moved by Beth's videos were nodding along. The science seemed clear. Dracovians were killers. Rusty was a Dracovian. Therefore, Rusty would eventually kill. When it was Roy's turn to speak, he stood at the podium feeling every one of his years. He wasn't a lawyer or a scientist, just a rancher who'd made a choice 6 months ago. But as he looked at Rusty sitting quietly in the corner, trying so hard to be good, he found his words. "I lost my family 5 years ago," Roy began. "Wife and daughter. Transport accident. I came out to the frontier because I couldn't stand being around people anymore. Couldn't stand caring about anything because caring hurt too much." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then I found Rusty dying in a crater. Her own kind had thrown her away. Left her to die alone and scared. And I couldn't do it. Couldn't just walk away from something that needed help even though I knew what she was." He gestured to Rusty. "Every day for 6 months I waited for her to turn violent. Waited for those instincts everyone talks about to kick in. But you know what happened instead?" She learned. "She understood when I was sad and tried to comfort me. She figured out how to help with ranch work because she knew it made me happy. She became gentle because gentleness was what I showed her." The prosecutor interrupted. "Anecdotal evidence doesn't change biology, Mr. Hutchins." "Maybe not. But Rusty's wing never healed right. She can't fly like other Dracovians. Can't be what her species expects. They abandoned her because she was defective." Roy's voice grew stronger. "But maybe that defect is what saved her. Maybe because she couldn't be what Dracovians are supposed to be, she got to become something different, something better." He walked over to Rusty, placing his hand on her scaled head. "I'm not saying she's not dangerous. Anything this size and this strong is dangerous. But humans are dangerous too. We've got weapons that can crack planets. We've wiped out species and conquered worlds. But we also build hospitals and write poetry and adopt orphans. We're capable of terrible things and beautiful things. Why can't she be the same?" The tribunal judge, an elderly man who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. "What you're describing is theoretical, Mr. Hutchins. We have no evidence that Dracovians can be anything other than what they've always been." Before Roy could respond, something unexpected happened. A group of aliens entered the hall, their presence causing immediate commotion. They were Talarians, a species whose homeworld had been destroyed by Dracovians 2 years ago. Everyone in the room knew their history. If anyone had reason to demand Rusty's death, it was them. The lead Talarian approached the podium. "We come to speak against the Dracovian," he said, and Roy's heart sank. But the alien continued. "We come to speak against judging a child for crimes committed by others. Against deciding someone's worth based on their species rather than their actions." The Talarian turned to face Rusty, and Roy felt the dragon's confusion. "My world burned. My family died. I have every reason to hate your kind." He paused, but hate didn't bring them back. Hate didn't rebuild our world. And hate won't prevent future violence if it teaches us to kill children for the crimes of adults. The room erupted in argument. Other aliens present protested. Human officials shouted for order. In the chaos, someone in the back of the room threw something. A protest sign or a piece of debris. Roy didn't see what it was. He only saw it flying toward Rusty. The dragon could have dodged, could have destroyed the attacker with one swipe. Instead, Rusty moved to shield Roy, taking the impact herself. The object shattered against her scales, and the room went silent. Rusty stood over Roy, not in aggression but in protection, making herself a barrier between him and any threat. The judge watched this display with careful eyes. "Stand down," he told Rusty. The dragon didn't understand the words, but she understood authority. Slowly, carefully, Rusty backed away from Roy and sat, lowering her head submissively despite every instinct probably screaming at her to protect her family. The tribunal deliberated for 3 hours, while Roy and Rusty waited in a small room. The dragon could sense Roy's stress and kept trying to comfort him, pressing her massive head against his shoulder and projecting feelings of loyalty and love. Win or lose, they had each other. That had to count for something. When they were called back, the room was packed with more people than before. News crews had arrived. The decision would be broadcast live across human and alien space alike. The judge looked exhausted. This tribunal has reached a decision regarding the Dracovian called Rusty. He paused, letting the tension build. We find that while the creature poses potential danger, its current behavior and the circumstances of its raising present a unique situation. Therefore, we grant Roy Hutchins conditional custody. Relief flooded through Roy, but the judge wasn't finished. The conditions are strict. Rusty must wear a monitoring device at all times. She will undergo behavioral assessments every 3 months. Any display of unprovoked aggression results in immediate termination. Mr. Hutchins is legally responsible for any damage or injury Rusty causes. And most importantly, this decision applies only to this specific case. It does not set precedent for other Dracovians. Roy barely heard the rest. He turned to Rusty, and the dragon's joy flooded through their connection, home, together, safe. The relief was so powerful that several people in the room visibly reacted to the emotional projection, but as they left the tribunal hall, Roy saw the protesters. Hundreds of them, some human, more alien, signs demanding Rusty's death, chants calling Roy a traitor. Security had to escort them through the crowd to their transport. Marshal Foster drove them back to the ranch personally. You won, but you also made enemies. Some powerful ones. The Galactic Council formally condemned humanity's decision. 3 alien species suspended trade agreements. Earth's diplomats are scrambling to smooth things over. I didn't mean to cause an incident, Roy said. Too late for that. You and Rusty are famous now, symbols. Some people see hope. Others see humanity's arrogance. She glanced at Rusty in the rear of the transport. Just keep her safe, Roy, and prove that compassion wasn't a mistake. The whole galaxy's watching. Back at the ranch, as the second sun set and painted the sky purple, Roy sat on his porch with Rusty beside him. The dragon had a monitoring collar now, but otherwise everything seemed normal. Just a man and his dragon. Home after a long day. Rusty projected contentment and safety. Images of the ranch, of their daily routine, of the life they'd built together. Then a new thought, one Roy hadn't felt before. Hope for tomorrow. Yeah, Roy said quietly, scratching behind Rusty's ear ridge. I got hope too. Now we just gotta prove we earned it. The stars emerged overhead, the same stars that other species looked up at while debating humanity's choice. But Roy didn't think about politics or protocols or the weight of expectations. He thought about the baby dragon he'd found dying in a crater, and how that choice to help had changed everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight they were home, together, and that was enough. The boycott started small. First, the fuel supplier refused to deliver to Roy's ranch. Then the feed store stopped taking his orders. Within a month, most businesses in the colonial capital wouldn't serve him. Other ranchers who'd supported Roy found themselves facing similar treatment. The message was clear. Choosing compassion came with a price. 2 years had passed since the tribunal. Rusty was now fully grown, massive enough to be seen from miles away. The dragon spent days helping Roy maintain the ranch, which had become harder without access to normal supply chains. Beth brought what she could, but her own business suffered for associating with Roy. Found a distributor 3 colonies over who'll sell to us, Beth said, unloading supplies from her truck. Costs triple, but it's something. Roy helped carry the bags, watching Rusty gently herd cattle in the distance. The dragon had grown more confident over the years, but remained fundamentally gentle. Every 3 months, government assessors visited and found no concerning behavior. The monitoring collar transmitted constant data showing Rusty's emotional stability. None of it mattered to the people who decided the dragon was a threat. Can't keep doing this, Beth, Roy said. You're losing money helping me. What else should I do? Let you starve to prove the haters right? She wiped sweat from her forehead. Besides, more people support you than you think. They're just scared to say it publicly. That night, Roy's communication terminal lit up with an incoming message marked urgent. The sender was listed as Galactic Council Diplomatic Corps. Roy's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever came from the council. The message was simple and terrifying. Dracovian battle fleet detected entering human space. Estimated arrival your sector in 72 hours. Destination appears to be Colony World Delta 7. Evacuations recommended. Roy read it 3 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. He walked outside where Rusty was watching the stars, something the dragon did every evening. Through their connection, Roy felt Rusty's contentment shift to concern as his emotions changed. "Your family's coming," Roy said quietly. "A whole fleet of them." Rusty's confusion flooded through their bond. Family? The concept carried weight for the dragon. Roy was family. Beth was family. The ranch animals were family. But the idea of other Dracovians felt foreign and frightening. The colonial government contacted Roy the next morning. Emergency evacuations were underway. Ships were loading civilians, prioritizing children and the elderly, and they wanted Rusty surrendered to authorities. The Dracovian fleet sent one message, Colonial Administrator Williams explained over video link. They want the defective one returned or they'll destroy the colony. You have to give them what they want. They'll kill her, Roy said. Probably, but if you don't surrender her, 30,000 people die. I'm sorry, Roy, but that's not a choice. That's math. Roy ended the call and walked out to where Rusty waited. The dragon had heard everything through their connection. She understood the basics. Her presence endangered humans. Her family wanted her back. People would die because of her. We'll go, Rusty projected simply. Save humans. Save Roy. No, Roy's voice was firm. We'll find another way. But what way? Roy spent the next day researching everything he could find about Dracovian culture. Most sources were military reports focused on their fighting capabilities. Rusty tried to help, projecting vague memories from before she'd been abandoned. Images of massive ships, feelings of cold judgment, the sense of being found lacking. Beth arrived as Roy pored over files. Evacuation ships are leaving. Most ranchers are already gone. They're saying anyone who stays is responsible for their own death. I can't leave Rusty, I know. That's why I'm staying too. She set down a rifle. If we're making a stand, might as well do it together. Roy wanted to argue but knew Beth well enough to know it wouldn't work. Instead, he showed her what he'd found. Dracovian culture values strength above everything. They abandon offspring they consider defective because weakness is shameful. But Rusty's not weak. She's strong, just in different ways. You planning to explain that to a battle fleet? Maybe, if they'll listen. The Dracovian ships arrived ahead of schedule, massive vessels that made human cruisers look like toys. 12 warships took position around Delta 7, their weapon systems active. Roy received a communication request within minutes. Against every survival instinct, he accepted. The Dracovian that appeared on his screen was enormous, scales black as space, eyes like frozen fire. Human, you harbor one of our discarded young. Return it or be destroyed. Roy stood tall despite his fear. Her name is Rusty, and I'm not returning her to die. The defective one should have died when we released it. You have interfered with natural order. The Dracovian's voice carried no emotion. You have 1 rotation to comply. Why do you even want her back? You threw her away. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across the alien's face. It is shameful that our defect lives under alien care. The shame must be erased. Roy felt Rusty press against the wall outside, listening. The dragon's sadness and resignation flooded through their bond. She'd always known her birth family had considered her worthless. Hearing it stated so bluntly still hurt. What makes her defective? Roy challenged. Because her wing won't work right? That's all? Dracovians fly. Dracovians hunt. Dracovians conquer. One that cannot do these things has no worth. The commander leaned forward. Why do you defend the useless creature? Because she's not useless. She's smart. She's kind. She helps me run my ranch. She learns faster than any animal I've ever known. Roy's voice grew stronger. She's everything you said she couldn't be. And maybe that's what scares you. We fear nothing. Then prove it. Come down here, meet her, see what she's become. If you still think she's worthless after that, then I'll accept your judgment. The commander was silent for a long moment. Finally, we will send 1 representative. If this is a trap, your world burns. No trap, just truth. An hour later, a shuttle landed near Roy's ranch. The Dracovian that emerged was almost as large as Rusty, its scales a deep purple. It moved with predatory grace, every motion speaking of violence held barely in check. Roy forced himself to stand his ground. Rusty emerged from the barn slowly. The two Dracovians faced each other, and Roy felt waves of complex emotion from his dragon: fear, hope, anger. The desperate desire to be seen as valuable by her own kind. The purple Dracovian circled Rusty, examining her. The wing is malformed. Flight would be impossible. She doesn't need to fly to be valuable, Roy said. Show me. Over the next hour, Roy demonstrated everything Rusty could do. The dragon herded cattle with perfect precision. Repaired a broken fence using her claws with delicate control. Solved a complex puzzle Roy had built to prove her intelligence. Through it all, the purple Dracovian watched in silence. Finally, it spoke. The defect has skills. But these are not Dracovian skills. These are servant skills. Weak skills. Roy felt his temper rise. Weak? She can do things you probably can't. She understands human language. She anticipates problems before they happen. She shows more intelligence and control than any combat drone. Intelligence without violence is useless, is it? Roy pulled up footage on his tablet, showing news from across human space. Rusty's story has been seen by billions. Scientists are studying how environment shapes behavior. Philosophers are debating the nature of identity. Children are learning that different doesn't mean dangerous. He looked the alien in the eye. Your way creates soldiers. Our way created something your species has never had. A bridge between two peoples. The purple Dracovian moved closer to Rusty. You choose this life? You choose humans over your own kind? Rusty's response was immediate and clear. A telepathic projection strong enough that even the visiting Dracovian felt it. Images of Roy finding her dying. Memories of healing and care. Feelings of love and belonging. The ranch is home. And underneath it all, a deep fundamental truth. She chose family over biology. The visitor recoiled slightly. The defect thinks like prey, not predator. No, Roy said. She thinks like someone who was given a choice and made it. That's not weakness. That's strength. The Dracovian was silent for a long time. Finally, it turned back toward its shuttle. I will report what I have seen. The commander will decide. After the visitor left, Roy and Rusty waited. Beth joined them on the porch, rifle across her lap. The three of them watched the sky as the Dracovian fleet continued its orbit. Roy's communication terminal stayed dark. What do you think they'll do? Beth asked. I don't know. But whatever happens, we're not separating. Roy rested his hand on Rusty's head. The dragon had been quiet since the visitor left, processing the encounter. Through their bond, Roy felt confusion and sadness. Rusty's own kind still saw her as defective. Still saw kindness as weakness. Worth something? Rusty projected quietly, the thought tinged with uncertainty. Right? Worth everything, Roy assured her. To me, to Beth, to everyone who's been moved by your story, your birth family's wrong about you. But as the hours passed with no word from the Dracovian fleet, Roy wondered if being right would be enough. The ships had enough firepower to glass the entire colony, 30,000 lives hanging in the balance, and all Roy could do was wait and hope that somewhere on that command ship, a Dracovian commander was learning the same lesson he'd learned 2 years ago. That the strongest thing any being can do is choose compassion over violence. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the drama playing out below. And Roy held on to his dragon, his family, his choice, and waited for the galaxy to decide if love could ever be stronger than hate. Sunrise on the third day brought no answers. Only the continued presence of 12 warships in orbit. Roy had spent the night on his porch, unable to sleep, while Rusty dozed fitfully nearby. Beth had finally gone home to check on her own ranch, promising to return before anything happened. The evacuation transports were long gone. Only a few stubborn colonists remained, and Roy couldn't blame those who'd left. His communication terminal chimed at dawn. Roy's hand shook as he accepted the call. The black-scaled commander filled the screen, expression unreadable. Human, I have reviewed the observer's report. I have watched recordings of the defective one's behavior. I have consulted with my warriors regarding the situation. The commander paused. We have reached a decision. Roy's heart pounded. Rusty woke and moved closer, sensing his tension. You claim the defect is valuable. That weakness can be strength. That our way is wrong. The commander's eyes burned with something Roy couldn't identify. I am that defect's parent. I personally threw it into space to die. It shamed me to have produced something so flawed. The words hit Roy like physical blows. He'd suspected, but having it confirmed made it real. This was Rusty's actual parent, the one who'd condemned her to death for the crime of being different. For 2 cycles, I have been forced to hear reports of my failure living among aliens. Forced to watch it perform servant tasks like trained livestock. The shame has been unbearable. The commander leaned forward. Now I will end that shame. I am coming to your world. I will face the defect, and I will judge whether it deserves to continue existing. The transmission ended before Roy could respond. Within the hour, a single Dracovian shuttle descended, landing in the open space in front of Roy's ranch house. The commander emerged, even more massive in person than on screen. Beside Roy, Rusty made a sound of pure distress. This was the one who'd abandoned her. The parent who'd decided she wasn't worth keeping. Other shuttles followed, carrying what Roy assumed were high-ranking Dracovians. They formed a circle around the landing area. An audience. Whatever was about to happen, it would be witnessed by Rusty's entire command structure. The defect will face me, the commander announced. If it shows Dracovian strength, I will consider allowing it to live. If it shows only weakness, I will end its shame myself. This is a fight. Roy stepped forward. Your own child? It is a test. Dracovians prove worth through combat. Always. Roy turned to Rusty, whose terror was overwhelming their bond. The dragon had never fought. Had never hurt anything intentionally. For 2 years, Roy had taught patience, gentleness, and control. Now those lessons might get Rusty killed. You don't have to do this, Roy said quietly. Rusty looked at him with eyes full of fear and sadness, but underneath Roy felt something else. Determination. A need to prove something, not to the Dracovians watching, but to herself. To show she wasn't worthless, wasn't defective, wasn't a mistake. I try, Rusty projected, for you, for family. The dragon moved to face her parent. The size difference was noticeable. The commander was larger, heavier, covered in battle scars. Rusty looked young and uncertain by comparison. The watching Dracovians made sounds of approval, expecting a quick victory. The commander attacked without warning, massive claws tearing through the space where Rusty had been standing. But Rusty wasn't there. 2 years of ranch work had taught her to move fast, to anticipate, to think 3 steps ahead. She dodged, not striking back, just evading. Fight defect, the commander roared. Show me you're worthy to live. Another attack, another dodge. Rusty's broken wing prevented flight but didn't stop her from being quick on the ground. The commander grew frustrated, attacks becoming wilder. Still, Rusty didn't retaliate. Through their bond, Roy felt the dragon's conflict. Every instinct screamed at her to defend herself, but Roy's teachings held firm. Violence wasn't the answer. There had to be another way. The commander caught Rusty with a tail sweep, sending the dragon tumbling. Before Rusty could rise, the massive Dracovian pinned her, claws at her throat. Weak, pathetic. You won't even fight your own parent. Because fighting you proves nothing, Roy shouted. He ran forward despite the danger, positioning himself between the 2 dragons. Killing your own child proves nothing except that you're afraid. Afraid? The commander's voice dripped with contempt. Of what? Of being wrong. Your entire culture is built on strength through violence. But what if real strength is choosing not to fight? What if the strongest thing Rusty ever did was survive your abandonment and build something better? The commander could have killed Roy with one swipe. Instead, the Dracovian paused. You would die for the defect? She's not defective. She's evolved. She's what your species could become if you stopped throwing away anything that doesn't fit your narrow definition of strength. Beneath the commander, Rusty stirred. The dragon pushed against the claws holding her down, not to escape, but to protect Roy. Despite being pinned, despite facing the parent who'd condemned her to death, Rusty's only thought was keeping Roy safe. The commander felt it. Every Dracovian present felt it through Rusty's powerful telepathic projection. Complete unconditional love, willingness to die protecting family, strength that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with bonds that couldn't be broken by fear or hatred. The commander released Rusty and stepped back. For a long moment, the massive Dracovian stared at its offspring. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, I threw you away because you couldn't fly. Couldn't hunt. Couldn't be what I expected. The commander's scales seemed to dim, but you became something I never imagined. Something I don't have words for in our language. Rusty stood slowly, moving to Roy's side. The dragon projected a simple question to her parent. Why come back? Why care now? Because watching you survive was worse than killing you would have been. Because seeing aliens value what I threw away felt like judgment. The commander looked at the assembled Dracovians. We have destroyed worlds, conquered systems, taken pride in our power, but we have never built anything. Never created beauty, never chosen peace when war was possible. The commander's gaze returned to Rusty. You have done all these things, and I must know, is that strength or weakness? Roy spoke carefully. It's strength in a way your people haven't explored. Rusty's stronger than most humans, despite being raised with gentleness. She's smarter because she learned to think instead of just react. She's more valuable because she builds instead of destroys. He paused. She's everything you could have been if someone had shown you there was another path. The commander approached Rusty slowly, almost cautiously. For the first time, parent and child stood together without violence. Through their telepathic connection, something passed between them. Rusty shared memories. Roy's kindness, the ranch's peace, the satisfaction of helping instead of hurting. The commander shared something unexpected. Regret. I cannot undo abandoning you, the commander said. Cannot erase the shame I caused, but I can make a choice now. The Dracovian turned to address the assembled witnesses. I declare the defect is not defective. What we called weakness is simply difference, and difference has value we never considered. Murmurs spread through the watching Dracovians. Some looked intrigued, others hostile. Change didn't come easily to a warrior culture. One of the observers stepped forward. Commander, you would shame us further? Admit our ways might be wrong? I admit our ways are incomplete. The commander's voice carried absolute authority. We throw away offspring that don't meet standards. But this human kept one we discarded and it became valuable. What else have we thrown away? What other potential have we wasted? The debate that followed was intense. Dracovian warriors argued in their harsh language while Roy and Rusty waited. Finally, the commander silenced everyone with a roar. The fleet will depart. The defect lives under human protection. But I make one demand. The commander looked at Rusty. Others will come. Young ones we deem flawed. Failures we would normally kill. The human will teach them as he taught you. Show us if this path has merit beyond one example. Roy felt the weight of what was being asked. You want me to raise more Dracovian young? I want proof that your way works. That compassion creates value. The commander's expression was unreadable. If you succeed, perhaps our people learn. If you fail, we will know strength through violence is the only path. It was a test, a challenge, and an opportunity. Roy looked at Rusty, who projected hope mixed with uncertainty. Could they do this? Could they show an entire warrior species that there was another way to measure worth? We'll do it, Roy said. But on one condition. The young ones come willingly and they're never forced back into your culture if they don't want to return. The commander considered this, then nodded once. Agreed. What they become is their choice, as it should have been for this one from the beginning. The Dracovian fleet departed that afternoon, leaving Roy and Rusty standing in the settling dust. Beth arrived minutes later, having watched everything from a distance. Did that just happen? She asked. Did you just agree to run a school for baby dragons? Roy laughed despite his exhaustion. Guess so. Over the following weeks, the story spread across both human and Dracovian space. Roy Hutchins, the cowboy who'd saved one abandoned dragon, had convinced a warrior species to reconsider their definition of strength. It wasn't a revolution. Most Dracovians still followed their old ways. But some began to question. Some began to wonder if the young ones they threw away might have value after all. The first new arrival came a month later. A small Dracovian with silver scales and an overbite that prevented proper hunting. Her parents had contacted Roy themselves, asking if he might try with their offspring what he'd done with Rusty. More followed. Within a year, Roy's ranch had become home to 7 young Dracovians, each learning that worth came from who you chose to be, not what biology demanded. Rusty helped teach them, showing by example that strength and gentleness weren't opposites. That family could be chosen. That being different wasn't the same as being defective. The Galactic Council remained skeptical, but couldn't deny results. Young Dracovians raised on Roy's ranch showed intelligence and social skills unheard of in their species. They built things, created art, learned multiple languages, became bridges between cultures that had only known war. Roy stood on his porch one evening. watching 7 dragons of various sizes help with ranch work while Rusty supervised. The sunset painted everything in gold and purple, and through his bond with Rusty, Roy felt contentment so deep it brought tears to his eyes. "Never thought I'd end up here," he said to Beth, who'd stopped by with supplies, "running a ranch for dragons. Never thought the galaxy would change because a cowboy couldn't leave a baby to die." Beth smiled. "But here we are." Roy looked at Rusty, who met his gaze with eyes full of love and trust. The dragon had grown from a dying infant into a teacher, showing others that survival wasn't about being the strongest or fastest. It was about adapting, learning, building connections that made you stronger together than you ever could be alone. The stars emerged overhead, and somewhere among them, Dracovian parents were making new choices, wondering if their flawed offspring might become something valuable, questioning assumptions held for generations. One cowboy, one dragon, one choice to show compassion instead of walking away. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the galaxy.